Welcome to the Casual Peew.
Peew.
The casual edition. We're eating sours. Would you like a sour?
We've still got a love hangover going on.
No.
Sweetest hangover.
Sour. Sour hangover.
That is sour.
Sour.
I'll just have one, thank you.
Okay. I don't know if you anymore.
Sour candy.
Mm-hmm.
Mike and I.
Oh my god, okay.
I think one just fell in the dog poop.
Oh no. So what's the love hangover?
It was Valentine's Day 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went out to Suzanne Barsh's party and I drank up a storm. That's my love hangover.
And you got the sweetest hangover. Do you want to get over? Well, that sounds like a drag queen. Do you want to get over?
I'm sure one of RuPaul's drag queens has recorded a YouTube song with those exact words.
Somewhere out there, an alternate universe, every drag queen has recorded a song with those words. Those lyrics.
So we were having a literary moment.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So for those of you who don't know, do people know who Jean Genet is?
People of a certain age, of a certain niche.
Okay, well, for those of you who've never
And
heard,
I don't mean niche and nephew.
for those of you who've never heard of Jean Genet, why don't you tell the our viewers who he is?
Well, he's a famous author. He wrote about the underworld, the prostitutes, the drag queens, and the hustlers, and the
Drug dealers.
of their day, of the day. And what day was this? This was like,
Well, and this was in the 1930s.
okay, in Paris.
In Paris, yeah. And I the reason I brought it up is because I recently read when I was on vacation.
And he's important because he's high end, he's high and low end. He's highbrow and lowbrow.
He is. I just read his book, Our Lady of the Flowers, and the language in Our Lady of the Flowers is very flowery, but it's very.
I love that.
It's all about low life people, or what would be considered low life people back then, which were tranny hookers, drug dealers, prostitutes. No thanks, and petty criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And
All of our friends.
at one time. Not so much today.
Right. Well, back then, now.
But we definitely knew people like that.
He's kind of the St. James of that milieu.
Yeah, he doesn't make it sound that fabulous.
Or really Michael Lipstow.
He doesn't make it sound fabulous, though.
Well, but he wouldn't be writing about it if he didn't think it was fabulous.
Maybe. I don't. Well, my point about Jean Genet that I was trying to make to Michael is that I think that people are celebrating him because he wrote about that, but not necessarily because his books were that good. Because I didn't think that Our Lady of the Flowers was that good of a book.
But by what standards? I mean, by back then.
By the standards of holding my attention through the whole book. And
but back then, because it was so shocking and so new, would it have back then? It probably would have, because you'd be like, because back then that was unheard of to write about something like that. So you would have been like, oh my God, this is such a scandal, I have to go show this to all my friends.
I think it was even banned in some countries when it first was published.
Looks like the Marquis de Sade. Did you see Quill?
No.
You know the story?
Of what?
The Marquis de Sade.
Yeah, I know the story.
I mean, how he was locked in the...
He was in an insane asylum, I believe.
The ruler of France had declared his works banned, and then, because he became kind of an anti-hero cult figure, that the books were being distributed anyway, and they were bestsellers, even though they were banned, then the ruler reversed the law and took over the ownership of the writings, because the guy was in prison, and you couldn't own anything when he was in an insane asylum. So the ruler's making money off of the publication of the book.
This was a movie?
Yeah.
What's it called?
Quill. But then, in spite of like him being in prison, he was still releasing pages of his new book, and he needed to get them out. He had them smuggled out of the prison, and every week there'd be talk of a new chapter that was smuggled out of the prison, and the person who was running the prison was getting in trouble because the ruler would say, "How are you letting him get this? How is he getting this out of the prison?" And they had ingenious ways of the laundry woman was disguised as whatever, and they kept putting him in more restrictive area, more restrictive area, more restrictive area, and he would still get the pages out until the end of it, of the movie, where the rumor is that he wrote the last line of the book with his blood, using his tongue, right? The blood on the walls of the prison. Because he was tortured and everything, like trying to say, how do you get the pages out? How do you get the pages out? And he wouldn't tell.
Well, I believe Our Lady of the Flowers, according to the version of the novel that I had, it explained that the novel, he wrote it twice. The first time he wrote it in prison, it was burned by the prison guards. And then, so he had to rewrite it.
Isn't that true? Oh, we must burn this!
Well, yeah, I mean, prison guards are assholes. So, yeah, I think it's true. I mean, did you generally like the prison guards at the prison you were at?
I did.
No, did you? Okay.
And they were good people. But most of them, it's probably different back then. But did he get the same kind of preferred treatment? Because the Marquis decided he was in prison, but he had a palace. He was in a palace prison, and he could order like caviar and whatever.
No, yeah, because he was royalty still. Mm-hmm. No, Jean Genet was a petty criminal. He was an orphan. You know, one of the things that I thought was incongruous about his book is that, you know, because he uses very flowery language in his book, it kind of doesn't go with his upbringing, which was he lived in an orphanage and was a petty criminal from like the age.
Well,
of
it's
10.
like voguing. It's like the voguing scene. How they like.
Yeah, but those are not people that speak with articulate words.
But no, but they aspire to high fashion. They do with what they did with fashion. He did with words. So they aspire to like this like upper echelon, like fabulous hoity-toity fashion.
But yes, because the book is written by someone who's clearly very educated.
Well,
so what was incongruous, and I'm not saying it's impossible, but I'm just saying that it was curious that somebody that came from such a lowly background would write in such an eloquent
But
way.
I think that was his selling point, was that he came from this lowly background, but he's like so eloquent. He's like the rakish, like.
Yeah, so he was very eloquent, but I just didn't like the book. It was kind of convoluted, and even though I did enjoy some of the characters, and there's lots of cocksucking in the book.
Yeah, I see that alone would have accounted for the book's popularity back then, because there were just no books like that.
Right,
So,
and it wasn't women sucking cocks; it was men sucking cocks.
Of course, I didn't think anything else. But so even the more reason that it would have been like a number one bestseller.
Yeah, I kind of struggled to get through the last third of it. I mean, it held my attention for the first.
Well, that's how I
pages.
felt about Proust. Like, remember time? What is it? Remember till time passed?
I never even read it.
Well, you know what it is, the Madeline, and the whole Madeline scene where he dips the Madeline in the tea and he tastes it and is suddenly transported back to being 3 years old with his grandmother, and the rest of the book is like his memory of the being with his grandmother and having that Madeline. And the scene where he hears he's in bed and he's waiting to hear the sound of his mother's dress as it brushes against the wall, because that means she's on her way up to saying goodnight to him, and he would at once yearn to hear this sound because it means she's coming up, and he would also dread hearing it because he knew that once he heard that voice, that sound, it was the sound before he would hear her coming up and saying goodnight, which was right before she would leave him. So he did want to hear it and he didn't want to hear it, and he was torn. I mean, I understood that very well.
Yeah, sometimes you read these authors because they're kind of legendary and they're in the canon of literature, but their books are not necessarily that interesting or engaging to us in the 21st century.
Well, have you read any Proust? I mean, talk about run-on sentences. It's like a sentence will be like 2 pages.
No, I know, but like a lot of writers are like that. Like even Mark Twain, I find is very hard to follow.
Yeah.
It's not that interesting.
You'd think that like Proust would have been scolded by his English teacher or whatever, saying, these are run-on sentences, you can't do this, whatever. But he's praised as a genius.
Well, it's his style, and it's Proustian. We'll be right back.
And now a word from our sponsor. Welcome back to the
Welcome back to the Pew.
We're still riffing on Jean Genet.
Well, this is really interesting because I thought that the Cocteau twins were riffing on Jean Genet, but they're actually riffing on Jean Cocteau, who is a compatriot of Jean Genet, and in the compatriot in the Pink Pantheon.
The Pink Pantheon.
Which is like the Velvet Mafia of the time.
Are we in the Pink Pantheon?
They were the patron saints of alpha aesthetics, a revolutionary romantics, the poets of rough trade and rhapsodic annihilation.
Annihilation?
They incubate a transgressive hallucinatory tradition of Pasolini, Fassbinder, and Kenneth Anger.
Well, I would say that Our Lady of the Flowers is hallucinatory because it's basically the whole thing. It's like he's either hallucinating or dreaming. You're not quite sure what it is. But I just felt it got in the way of a good story about rough trade.
They were dandies. Oh, here are the dogs that don't bark.
They're barking now.
Genet is an artist of overload, rapture, Baroque lyricism. He is at ease in prison in Palestine, arm in arm with Huey Newton. Who that is? Who's the talk show host?
The Black Panther.
Talk show host.
Oh, he was a Black Panther.
One of them would fondly remember when I pulled out my cock, it was always covered in shit.
Yeah, I thought that.
Fassbinder did a movie of Genet's masterpiece. Carell?
Yeah. Well, I've seen Well, there's another example of a movie that everybody holds up to be so great, and yet it's boring. Have you ever seen Carell?
No.
I think it's very boring. Sorry, I hope I'm not offending anybody out there. So
I mean, I think you're looking at it through the wrong context. You're looking at it from today's.
I'm looking at it from an entertainment. Like I read books and watch movies to be entertained.
Okay.
If I don't feel entertained,
did you see Salo? 120 Days of Sodom?
I think I've seen. I've never actually sat down and seen the whole thing
because it's tiring. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it's boring.
Well, I was just going to say it's repetitive. If it can be boring that they're on an island where they're having sex with kidnapped teenagers that they pull the teeth out with wrenches so they can give blowjobs with gums and eat their own shit for dinner and dressed like a nun. If that can be boring, but it is boring because it happens over and over. Another variation of that happens over and over and over the whole, to the point where you're like, oh, another person who can only get off while raping a girl who's watching her father be hung by a Christmas tree in the middle of July. Crazy.
Right. I mean, they could have thrown a time warp in there.
Yeah.
A little dance or some music, but they didn't. It's just not a good story. That's the problem. They're making people like Jean Genet wrote these stories that are just not. They're not fast paced by our standards.
Well, they bring into the future. They talk about Todd Haynes, that he would be an example of a Jean Genet of a contemporary Jean Genet.
The only movie off the top of my head by Todd Haynes. No, I'm thinking of.
The Karen Carpenter story.
No, the only movie of his that I remember well is the Velvet Goldmine, the David Bowie movie.
Oh well,
which I like. I like that.
The Karen Carpenter story.
I didn't see that.
You didn't see it?
No.
Yes,
is that
you
the one
did.
with the Barbie dolls?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe I did see it with you, possibly.
Yeah, where she's reaching for the X-Lax, the pill. Mom, did these polka dots make me look fat?
Well, getting back to my original point, because Michael brought up the Cocteau twins, saying that they had some kind of connection to Jean Genet, which we have ascertained is not true. That the Cocteau twins is another one of those groups that people hold up as being these iconic.
So is it a coincidence that all of these things are, in your estimation, are things that other people think are genius, but you think are boring? Maybe you just don't know how to recognize. Maybe it takes genius to recognize genius.
Maybe, and I'm no genius.
I recognize it as genius.
Okay, I'm no genius.
Emperor's new clothes.
See you next time.
Bye.